The show's going to be a little different this season.
We are referring to this as Game of the Game. Well, the game is that there's a hat. In that hat, there are prompts. We do not know what these prompts say.
You and we both don't know what we're going to be talking about next episode. Cookie Pocket, the game of the game.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.
The game of the game.
Japan's probably pretty humid right now, too.
Not as much as it was in 1945, man. Probably. But
yeah, it was probably a little quite hot. That
certainly everyone has seen New York, I Love You. But
yes,
what they don't know in that massive directorial collaboration, there was a man named Jiang Wen, and Jiang Wen was also the director for Devils on the Doorstep. Who are the Devils? What's the Doorstep? I don't know. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny.
Who are the Devils? That's actually a good question.
Everything I've read about the film says that Devils is like a because it means, I think it culturally it means something else in its original language. But everything that I've seen says that devils is like a colloquial term for like invaders or the enemy in Chinese culture. But of course, even though literally it translates as something like the devils are here, a literal English translation is never gonna, embody all the meaning that's kind of culturally and whatever the original Chinese or the original Mandarin is.
Well, I guess I'll provide historical context now. Unless Christian has something to say. His mouth opened like he was about to say something. He's just surprised that they were just keeping them in sacks in the Great Wall the whole time. So
a little bit, yeah.
This film takes place basically towards the end of World War II. It's essentially it has satirical elements, but it's largely an irony, like an ironic kind of film that essentially pokes fun in the darkest way possible in the Japanese invasion and occupation of China in the late 30s into the end of World War II. And it's surprisingly complex. I honestly did not know anything at all about this, and I was talking with my old pal, first name Chat, last name GPT, and he was telling me, he, she, it, me, they, Zimzer, was telling me that there's plenty of good World War II films that were centered around like Chinese or Japanese culture, because I felt like that was an area that we've never really addressed ever. And it's something you don't really see American, or especially Hollywood, really go after to a large degree, just because it's not really an appealing subject matter for Western audiences in general. And this does, I would say, one of my biggest critiques right out the gate is that there is a sense of Eastern context that needs to be understood, and a certain level of sympathy is not really going to be felt by Western audiences when it's oriented around something that's such a significant piece of history in both Chinese and Japanese culture. And I think what makes it especially complex and interesting from a historical standpoint is that, and historical and just an like present day educational standpoint, is that Japan is very generally averse to talking about Japanese atrocities, and China is in a much different way averse to talking about Chinese atrocities. even if it's mostly about the Kuomintang, the nationalists, they will still very much not talk about anything bad in Chinese history whatsoever. And one thing they will 100% point to, and this is largely an origin of the Communist Party, is the Nanking Massacre, and all of the events after it were a pretty significant political talking point for the communists, and that's why this was so heavily censored, and just its very existence is already like crossing the line. But I do want to hear from you guys.
I wasn't critical of this going in or anything like that. But I enjoyed this, I think, a lot more than I expected to. This might be, well, okay, that might be a stretch. It's certainly my most enjoyed Mitchell pick that I haven't like had any impression on going in. I think I knew I was going to love Apocalypse Now, but I really didn't know what I was going to think of this necessarily. And you kind of encouraged us, don't look anything up about it. So I knew just from like how it was labeled on the website of my local library, support your library, kids. I knew that it was a comedy war film. And from the cover, I was guessing it wasn't going to be like Abbott and Costello join the Marines or something like that. I was guessing it was going to be kind of heavy. Yeah, it wasn't going to be Stripes. But you know, even based on that general, and I expected it to be longer because Google claims on its front page that this movie is 2 hours and 44 minutes. It's not. It's a refreshingly crisp 2 hours and 19 minutes. But I really enjoyed it. I don't know a great deal about Chinese culture or Chinese history beyond the broad basics. I would say I know more about Japan than I do China, but even then I'm no expert on Japanese history either. But I thought that this movie felt really bold and individual in a way that I really enjoyed. And even if, you know, Japan, even if they kind of hesitate to talk about the atrocities of World War II, there certainly, I think, isn't like a national, passing of the buck. Like, oh well, we didn't do those things. You know, having been to the Hiroshima Memorial, there's a very like outspoken, like, hey, this was our fault. We brought this on ourselves aspect to it. But I mean, even still, it felt really daring for this movie to address these events. First of all, as kind of a comedy, because there's very serious, heavy things that happen in the movie. But then there's also just borderline clownery and buffoonery. I mean, I think of like the scene where the guy completely fails to chop off the two guys' heads, despite the fact that he's this legendary swordsman. And I mean, that's it feels like something right out of like a Charlie Chaplin movie where they're chasing him around in the tunnels and they can't get him held down. But it all works. It doesn't, the tones don't clash. I was both entertained and devastated in equal measure. And I think the comedy really makes kind of the last 20 minutes or so even more gutting. When it takes a serious turn, a really serious turn, it really does in a way that's really kind of shocking and devastating. So I enjoyed it a lot. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I was kind of like borderline towards the end on whether it might get like full marks from me, but I do think the ending goes on a little too long. It has a bit of I think the actual ending proper is very good, but the actual structure of the final act, it has a bit of a Return of the King problem, where it feels like, oh, so this is the end. Oh, never mind. Oh, so this is the, oh, never mind. Oh, so okay. Now, that was the actual ending. Like it does feel a little drawn out, even though I do like where it actually ends.
Yeah, I still hate how much my review for this reads like a season 1 review for me.
I don't know anything about anything.
It's not as vitriolic.
This did remind me, kind of, in terms of, you know, how it addresses events. It reminds me a little bit of The Death of Stalin, which you also didn't really enjoy in season 1.
Well, I think I like Death of Stalin more than this.
You liked it more than I did. I don't
I think I was like a 3 out of 5. Maybe fence sitting on Death of Stalin, and I think if I saw it again now, I would like it. But I would almost liken this more to, this is not from season 1, but The Great Dictator, the Chaplin film we discussed. And I don't know that I came in with specific expectations for this, but I really, really enjoyed the setup for this. And Zach and I were chatting before you got on, Mitchell, and I said, I'm going to say something that Zach is going to like. And what that is that I thought that the opening sex scene was very cleverly shot and artfully done. And I don't know how much of that was like a product of how strict Chinese censors are about love scenes or sex scenes in general. It may be, but I think that initial setup of learning that he's with that the woman he's with was married to his brother who's since died, and the setup of the gun pointed at his head and the faceless person stranding these prisoners with him. That's a really compelling setup. I think I didn't get as much from the actors as I would have liked, and I think, like Mitchell said in his opening thoughts, that's maybe like a Western sensibility issue, or maybe not, because I don't always feel that way when I'm watching a Kurosawa film. But I think this is beautifully shot. I would like to hear more historical context from Mitchell about this, but I felt like most of the conflict did not necessarily beget detail about Japan and China. It felt like, except for when there's obvious references to Japanese honor, or like the two prisoners at the outset. The one is like, kill me, and the other guy's like trying to calm him down and mistranslating on purpose. That obviously speaks to the sort of ritual suicide elements of Japan. But beyond that, it felt like a more, I don't know, it felt like it could have been any two sides. I think Wen's bravery is evident, but I think it was less detailed than I expected it to be in that like political timely sense. I also felt like, and it's interesting thinking of this as the prompt, which was choose a film directed by someone not primarily known as a director. Which, by the way, I don't know if Wen may be primarily known as a director in China. I can't speak to that.
I just to jump in here, because I wondered about this myself, and I had an itching for revenge after last episode. And he has made a few different films and is quite celebrated as a director. But compared to his work as an actor, I do think it's fair to say he's mainly known as an actor rather than a filmmaker, even in his home country. Because I think he's only directed like 7 films compared to, I think, the like over 24 movies that he's acted in. So I think it's a fair choice. Maybe Justice Christian will strike that down, but
no, I'm okay with it. But I just bring it up because I think that at times his performance it's not so out of touch for me to say it's egotistical, but it feels like in his more emotive, like big moments that I would have liked to see what those would have looked like with a director other than himself. I think that it's possible those moments for his character could have worked better if he wasn't like at the top of the call sheet and the top of the whole thing, you know. But I don't know. I've also talked before on this show about how, on some level, when we talk about stuff, our experience of a movie is like an abstract, subjective thing for the most part. And when we talk about it, we're trying to confine that in like objective terms. And I think for me, a significant part of my subjective experience of watching a film is the restoration and the visual. And I think watching a black and white film in particular on DVD does it no favors, especially in this era of high dynamic range where the shadows give you so much more in Dolby Vision or just in any HDR or in any Blu-ray restoration would have given you more detail too. This at times was a little like fuzzy. I also got the DVD from the library like Zach. And I also, last thing, I noticed on an insert in the DVD case that they said a longer version of this was screened at Cannes, and I'm guessing that's the length that you cited earlier, Zach, but that Wen wanted to cut a lot from it, and that he meant to do it before Cannes but ran out of time. But the version we saw on DVD is like his director's version and the only version he authorized for international distribution.
I before we move on, I do just want to jump in and mention, because I think it's going to be central to a lot of discussion later. I personally like they don't get that specific about the perspectives of either side of the China-Japanese conflict. Because to me, I don't really think this is a movie about the war. This is a movie about human nature and the people who are stuck in the middle. I think there's a consistent emphasis that for the peasants who live in this village, it doesn't necessarily matter to them that much who's in charge, because regardless of who's at the top of the totem pole, they're still getting pushed around and bullied and mistreated. And I think even towards the end of the film, when the Japanese lose, there's a lot of visual emphasis that even when the Chinese government is ostensibly in charge and we have saved you all, we've won the war, a lot of the imagery is still the same. And there's the idea that they've just kind of traded one oppressor for the other. So to me, it was more a movie about these people who are just being oppressed and from either side, and how they have to kind of try and get along in this absurd situation, rather than the actual conflict and the nature of why Japan and China were opposed.
Yeah, fair points. I just moved my review up to a 3-star because I decided that there's enough artful stuff. Yeah, I was sitting between the two the whole time, and I think that's fair. And I think what you're saying is why the ending works so well, Zach. Not just the very end where, big spoiler alert, Wen's character is beheaded, but the whole sort of renewed occupation. It definitely, if not replacing the Japanese forces that were there ahead of time, to me it almost feels more oppressive or claustrophobic than it did before.
I think both of you are definitely hitting the nail on the head. I'm just like sitting here like compiling knowledge. Yeah, I think you're both hitting the nail on the head with that. I think that what I've learned from my research and things, I think that in general, Chinese culture, especially at this time, is defined by subtlety and a sense of stoicism, and the respect is like a calming respect in a literal and metaphorical sense. And I think the veneration of ancestors is like a pretty foundational Confucian ideology. And I think that doesn't show explicitly in the film, and I think that was very much intentional. And I also think that is in and of itself is a very, very bold statement, because China is all about preserving their culture, cultural superiority, venerating your ancestors, and blind respect. And in this case, blind respect it ruins their whole situation, because they blindly respect this random dude that poked his bayonet and's like, take these boys, and then that's it. And then they got the entire film, and all these guys, and they're all in this collective mindset trying to determine what they're going to do with them. And they're completely absurd. I think I saw one Letterboxd review that said it's like a drunken madman just making random decisions, and that's effectively what's happening. And I think it very much speaks more to a flimsiness in their cultural integrity, and I think it's that much more than it is a pure critique of like sides in a war. It's definitely, like Zach said, it's like they're ordinary people stuck completely in the middle of the situation, and they have every reason not to care about what country they belong to. And I think the juxtaposition and the simultaneous irony of the Japanese being so nationalistic and so hell-bent on enforcing their culture, while at the same time being completely essentially averse to it when you're looking at the prisoners, especially Kayasuma or whatever the main guy's name is, the not translator guy.
Yes.
That guy is a pretty great representation of why that nationalistic integrity falls to absolutely nothing. And I just think that's so cool that that's done, while at the same time the main character, who's kind of juggling through this whole thing the whole time, and he is extremely indecisive, and he's not culturally committed to anything. He's ultimately the one that's killed, and he's the one that you're meant to feel the most sympathy for. while the Chinese / Americans are kind of, reestablishing order and everything. And it's just that was such a crazy turn of events, and it was so insane that there were so many tones that were being juggled all at once, and all at the same time. You have like physical comedy happening. You have the Japanese freaking, when they drew that box and they told that guy to stay in the box, and then they come back later and they're like, oh, you see, he's such a dummy peasant to staying in the box because we told him to. And it's just it's crazy how much you can poke fun at authority the whole time while also barely having the authority there at all. And it's just like there's so many layers to the irony that it makes it so enjoyable. And I mean, with irony, you can juggle a lot of different themes with it. You can kind of lay off the gas and pick it up kind of whenever you feel like, as long as there's kind of a consistent thread. And I think that consistent thread is that that massive cultural difference. And I think the best part about it is that it isn't explicitly stated for the Chinese, but it very much is for the Japanese. I think that in and of itself is like, I don't think I've ever seen a World War II film that was anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but I kind of retracing to some of Christian's comments on the black and white, I think the choice to shoot this mostly in black and white was a really intelligent one, because this, especially with the comedy and potentially the quite low budget, shooting this in color, I think could have come across, it could have overplayed the hand, and it could have come across as more absurd and looked like How I Won the War with John Lennon or something like that, where you have these characters kind of bumbling around the wilderness in period correct costume, but making it black and white and making it look like a lot of old war movies, which was their intention. It creates this kind of feeling of like, these are ridiculous things and you are kind of laughing at them, but there's also a consistent edge of like, okay, this could go bad at any moment. Like the drawing of the box and the guy who keeps walking out of it. That's an absurd moment, and there's stuff to laugh at, and that kind of tragedy or that comedy of errors as they're bumbling through the town and they can't hear them screaming. But there's also there's something about it which feels like it could switch to like a sort of Schindler's List tone at any moment, where one of these people gets shot on a whim for no reason at all, and then it's just over and done with. And I think that consistent riding of the line between like, haha, no, was what really worked for me. And then, I mean, we've already spoiled the ending, but to spoil it even more, the choice to cut from black and white to color when we get the perspective of his head at the very end, I think was brilliant, especially as it's not like a perfect color. It's kind of overexposed and grainy, and it looks like a snuff film or something. And it really ends the film on this incredibly visceral, real note. Whereas the rest of the film was so dedicated to this old-fashioned war film artifice.
Yeah, not just his perspective and his head on the ground, but the callousness of the, I don't know his rank, but whoever the Chinese official
Major
is
Gao.
that addresses. Yes, okay, Major Gao. When they're like, oh yeah, we turned in our guns and we're not allowed to use them anyway, but we could use the sword. And he's just like, oh, how annoying. But yeah, go ahead, use the sword. I feel like at that point, it's almost not funny anymore when they react with that callousness. But as Zach said earlier, I think the comic moments early on just tend to punctuate these devastating points more.
But even just before the execution, this is what I mean, where I really love this movie. Even right before the execution, they do make the Major Gao. Mm-hmm. Yes, they do make him kind of, he has a comedic moment because he's got his injured leg and he's like falling backwards on the stage. And there's the two Americans who only ever just chew gum and swear.
That is great.
Like over the top American accents. And yet, despite that, the following moment doesn't feel like Dr. Strangelove, which Dr. Strangelove is a great movie. I'm not, but they're totally different tones. And this somehow manages to be really visceral and kind of disturbing basically in the same breath as it is quite funny and silly. It's a real achievement, and not one that I was necessarily expecting from Bandolier Rogue One man. What is his name in that movie? Major Gao?
His name is Baze Malbus.
Baze Malbus.
Baze Malbus. I think another thing, especially because it takes up a lot of the film's runtime, is the Chinese all kind of going back and forth with each other about they're not really planning anything. I was saying like they were trying to figure out what to do with the prisoners, but at the end of the day, most of the conversations weren't really about that. It was mostly just about like, what are we even doing? What's going on? You turtle screwer. And then the old guy is like rolling back and forth the whole time, perfectly comedically timed. While then they're all like super like engaged with each other, super emotive, like trying to just like get their all individual opinions across. And there's absolutely no order, no consistency. There's no semblance of any culture at all. There's like nothing about them that makes any of them especially unique other than the random opinions that they have. And I think that in and of itself is a super easy route for any audience member to really enjoy it. And I think it's like there's little inklings of like they're talking about, oh, well, those freaking, you know, I don't know if it's a slur, but they say Japs, you know, they call them the Japs the whole time. But yeah, and you know, it's just it's incredibly insane to me that even with all of that history and everything about how horribly millions of Chinese suffered in the rape of Nanking and the invasion of Manchuria and that whole years-long occupation and the absolute brutality, like some of the worst outside of the Holocaust, like the worst brutality of World War II by far. And there's still, you can still make a film that's like, they're basically just being racist against Japanese. Like they're basically just absolutely caricaturizing them. And even when the Japanese are presented in the film, they're fairly caricaturized. And to a point where I think this might go into what Zach mentioned in his review, you almost kind of feel like they're being portrayed much better than the Chinese are. And that irony is so insanely bold, but it totally works because it's proven by all these distinct characters that all have like the little quips and tropes about them. And you're not really rooting for them at all. You're kind of just rooting for like the next scene to happen. You're rooting for the like just the war to end so that all of the insanity stops and that they can have other things to focus on. Like the Chinese can stop being absolutely fearful of every single authority and like not knowing how to react and like basically bumbling around like absolute idiots in the film because they have no idea when Mi's coming back. It's Chinese New Year. He hasn't coming back. What's happening? And then the Japanese are like barely even enforcing anything. They're like the most fake authority ever, even though obviously in real life they're all about they're imposing their authority and being absolutely brutal. And all of that is saved towards the very end as like that super impactful last 20 minutes. And that is just like such a creative way of going about it. I just would have not anticipated that at all. And I will mention the acting. I did think the performances were pretty good. I also think in the comedic sense, the supporting characters anyway did serve mostly a comedic purpose. Like that one guy that was with the executioner and the executioner himself, largely kind of fed into the narrative in a comedic way and less of a serious way. But the scenes that they had were short enough and they kind of had like one or two notes about them and that was kind of it. They were kind of disposed of. But other than that, I think the leads did a pretty great job, honestly. But I can see what Christian's saying about Wen because he does act as if he's in his own film a little bit, and he does act like not like the moral authority, but like the messaging authority, I guess, where it's like that anything that he's going to say is always going to be the most important thing to the plot. And I don't think he was framed as a protagonist necessarily, in my opinion. So I think that could be considered problematic. But other than that, I mean, I think the messaging is just so well done, and it's so incredibly well written that it wasn't really a huge bother for me. But I thought I'd mention that to help
Yeah.
Christian's point.
Well, also to
I
address
appreciate
Christian's
the
point about
assist.
the acting, I didn't really have any issues with the acting in this. A lot of this did remind me of the performances from classic Kurosawa films, and a few of the actors I think were pulled directly from kabuki, which was also the case in lots of classic Japanese films, which is where a lot of the kind of really big performances come from. I was reading that Ken Zhang, is that the director's name?
Zhang Wen.
Zhang Wen. I did read that like he found directing himself to actually be quite anxiety inducing. Because I think when people think directing yourself is difficult, they think it's difficult because you have so many things to juggle with so many roles, because he also co-produced and wrote the film. And that's true, but it's also difficult, I think, as an actor because there's nobody giving you feedback other than yourself. Which is often a really vital role of a director, is to go, hey, why don't we try this one little thing? And apparently that did lead him to kind of like distrust his crew at some point in production, because he would ask like his cinematographer or his script supervisor for feedback on his performance, and he started to feel like at a certain point in the day they would just tell him whatever they felt like he wanted to hear so they could move on. And I don't know if he's done it since, but I think I read that at the time he was like, yeah, I don't want to act in my own films anymore. I think in terms of the messaging, I think that, because you made mention of it, Mitchell, and I wanted to address, I did mention in my review that I think a lot of this film depicts the Japanese in more of a positive light than I would have expected. Now, that is taking into account that there is a scene towards the end of this film, a whole sequence, where these Japanese soldiers absolutely massacre this village in an incredibly brutal fashion. They burn the whole place down. A child is killed basically on camera. I mean, you don't see a weapon enter the body or anything like that, but you basically see everything else. A man is thrown down a well and covered in grain. These are brutal deaths, but all the same, I do think that the emphasis of the film is not the Japanese were evil and did evil things. I think the emphasis is on the kind of authoritative structures that put people in a place where they feel like they need to do these things to each other. Because before that massacre scene, there's a lengthy party sequence where the Japanese and these villagers are getting along, they're laughing, they're singing, they're getting drunk and belly dancing, and that to me doesn't feel like a ploy. It doesn't feel like we're gonna get these guys good and drunk and then we're gonna kill them all, or that doesn't feel like the case at all. It feels like the emphasis is, if not for these imposed structures, these are guys, these are people who would get along, drink together, party together, and wouldn't have any problem with each other. But as soon as that kind of structure is asserted, and we kind of made reference to this sort of thing with the last one we talked about, Last Samurai, and how the Japanese kind of started to emphasize the way of the samurai and the honor of the samurai during World War II to kind of collectively brainwash people as a force against their enemies. As soon as that's kind of recalled, like a light switches, and it seems like, oh, well, we were friends and we were all getting along, but this is what we're meant to do. And all of the Japanese turn on these villagers who they were quite friendly with. I mean, even the naval commander who was passing out candy to the kids, when instructed to, stabs a child with a bayonet. And I think you could take away from that, I suppose, the idea of, oh, well, deep down, the Japanese were really evil and did these evil things. But to me, I think it's more about like the way that people are put in boxes and how it's human nature for us to want to get along with each other. But at the same time, I think it's human nature to like to be put in boxes to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. And I think it's about kind of the tragedy of the contrast between those things. Or that's what came across to me, at least.
Yeah, I think it the film does something that is rarely seen in war films, where in between a person's core human traits and their national belonging, their national identity is their culture. And I feel like this really emphasizes that in between cultural part, because normally the culture's either like set one way or the other, where it's like, yeah, it's like their human nature and their culture, but they're nationalized. So that's the reason why they are the way they are. Or it's like, well, their culture and their nationality is like lumped together because their nationality is their culture. And in this, I feel like there's a very clear distinction where the Japanese are very clearly just people. The Chinese are very clearly just people. But ingrained culturally in them are major issues that were prevalent at the time, things that they should very much care about, and it's ultimately their downfall under that nationalist tone. So not only are they attacking the nations they belong to, the film is like targeting the specific nationalities, but it's also targeting a culturalism that is both, it's really in both. It's both their nationality and their human traits. And I think it basically attacks it as a morally gray situation is pretty much what I'm saying. Because normally it's like one way or the other, where it's like, yeah, it's like he's Japanese, but like, you know, he's still a nice guy. Or it's like, oh, he's Japanese, he's a bad, you know what I mean? And even in the morally grayness of someone's national commitment, which is kind of what we saw with with The Last Samurai.
Yeah.
There's like an ambiguity with that. There's also an ambiguity with people's cultural commitments, because even in the film, there's very clearly cultural differences between the Chinese and between the Japanese. And I think that ambiguity is something that's very hard to target, and I think the film did it very well.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if to me it came across that the film was emphasizing like a tragic flaw on anybody's part, but I do think the cultural differences are definitely an emphasis. I wonder, I mean, China is and has been for a very long time so big that I wonder if many of the peasants in the 1940s in China would really have even thought of themselves necessarily as, oh, I'm Chinese, rather than, oh, well, I'm from this village. Because to me, that's kind of what came across to me for the people who kind of have these two hostages dumped on them in the film. Is they're not really thinking about their duty to China. They're not thinking about their duty to any kind of a resistance. They're thinking about, well, you know, we have to figure out what to do with these guys, or somebody's going to destroy the village. It'll either be the Chinese resistance or it'll be the Japanese. But the village is in danger. We're in danger. And I that felt like the perspective to me. I wonder if that would have been the mindset of a lot of Chinese people during that period. Just because in a country that large, pre-globalization and the internet, culture is a lot more localized to where you are and what you know and where you can travel by foot.
So I think you have identified the reason why so many Chinese became communist and why the communists won. That is the reason why. Because in effect, communism as an ideology is about an identified pre-written caste system, and that you are a peasant, and that you are the one that is meant to lead the country. You are the individual as a part of this collective. You are a part of this collective that is in charge of the country, essentially, and an ideal situation. And I think that ideology trumps whatever national identity you have. And the nationalists were very much ingraining the culture with the nation. And I think that is the reason why the communists did so freaking well. And just for a little bit of context, the reason why President Xi even won elections at all, and why he rose to power so quickly, is because his dad was a part of the Trail of Tears, basically the original band of communists that essentially started the party under Mao. And President Xi purposely became a politician and educated himself in extremely rural districts, and became extremely politically successful in Beijing because he was the only guy that was his dad was an OG, so that makes him an OG, basically by extension. And he had actually gained support with the rural regions that had almost nothing to do with Chinese national identity. And I think that is a great. I think that being a takeaway just proves how freaking great this film is in terms of that subtlety.
Yeah, I don't know a great deal about Maoism or the communist revolution in China, but I will say there's some consistency there, because that's why the revolution worked in Russia as well, was you had so many peasants and serfs who their identity was, I am a peasant, not I am a Russian loyal to the royal family. So yeah, a little communist fast fact minute there.
Yeah. Join now.
Thank you, Mitchell. I guess just to be a little bit of a downer, since we've heaped so much praise on this, I still think in when I sit down and watch it, I think there are two like absolutely outstanding bookends, that beginning and that ending. I still think we maybe get a little bit too much time where the two Japanese prisoners are prisoners, and there's a lot of conversation about, oh, what do we do with them? And they have the conversation through the translator with them, and then they have another. I think there's maybe a few too many scenes to that effect, and then once their captors become then the captors captive to the Japanese, it kind of is a repetition of that dynamic to some extent. So I think that still plays a little bit repetitive and maybe lowers the momentum of the film. But having heard what all of you, what you two have said, I do think it's clever, and like Zach has mentioned many times, it's importantly about humanity and structures, and less about I don't know, these two governments, I suppose. But it's very powerful. I would still say, if you're not like a big art movie buff or not keen on foreign films in general, you will probably struggle with this.
Yeah.
You know who you are, listener. If you've enjoyed our more challenging or perhaps more in deep artful films, I think you'll get a lot out of this.
That donkey really went for that horse.
Oh boy.
I was so floored when that speech was going on and the donkey mounted the horse.
I wouldn't say this is necessarily at the roof of artsy fartsy and hard to get into, but there is more of a separation here than I would say there is for The Last Samurai or something like that.
Oh, sure.
I don't necessarily know
or something.
Well, depending upon what kind of a viewer you are, Suspiria might be less palatable than this. There might be more of a cultural barrier. But I do think it depends. I was going to say, though, I don't really know how to address the length complaints other than to say that I don't really agree. But I will, because to me, the point where it felt like, okay, we're wearing on a little bit, like I said, was the ending. But I do like the way it actually ends. The ending did make me kind of wonder at one thing, though. I guess we never really we didn't really talk about what the movie's actually about. We kind of addressed it here and there.
That's true, actually.
But I guess just to give a general overview, the film is about this man named Dasan who lives in a little village along the remains of the Great Wall during the Japanese occupation of China. One night, a guy who only calls himself Mi breaks into his house with a gun pointed to his head, and he says, "Hey, watch these two guys for me. I'll be back in 5 days."
Yeah, I think so.
He does not come back in 5 days, and then they have to figure out what they're going to do with these two hostages. But when Mi breaks in and holds the gun to his head, there's an emphasis, because it's basically all we see of his character, on the gun that he's wielding and the kind of gun that it is. Now, I don't know what kind of gun it is, but I can recognize that.
Mauser.
Mauser, okay. I recognize that name, and I recognize that silhouette. It's pretty distinct. And at the end, there is an execution scene before Dasan himself is executed, where somebody is shot in the back of the head by a Mauser, which to me feels like very deliberate setup and payoff. but I wasn't sure. I find myself struggling to derive what the payoff is meant to be there. Is that me committing the execution? Oh dear. Well, it wasn't me. But, is that character
The joke
committing the
continues.
execution? Or I was interested what your impressions were on that, because that was a bit where that kind of had me, kind of was a snag for me. And then the film moves on quickly enough that I was like, okay, I have to start paying attention to different things now. But
So in general, the Allies shared an absolute wealth of weapons and munitions, right? And amongst those, one of the cheapest ones and easily acquirable ones was the Mauser. And it was generally the Chinese military that used them. The Japanese would have used a lot of natively or nationally, locally, domestically produced pistols, which would have been the Nambu probably, which looks quite a lot different. It looks a little bit more like a Luger. So when I first saw that, I was like, oh, it's like a Chinese guy or something, or a Chinese military, because that's the only thing, like, historically that would make any sense. But I mean, it could be a civilian that borrowed it. It could have been like somebody retired, because the war, keep in mind, the war's been going on for China for like over a decade at this point, basically. So that's up in the air, but I mean, maybe. And I also think I was still trying to discern the meaning of the takes 9 seconds, 3 blinks or whatever the thing is with the 1/ guy, and then ends up actually happening to him at the end. I was wondering if that was just for the sake of seeing it actually happen, or if that was supposed to be metaphorical too. I'm not sure.
I think that's just meant to be dramatic irony, because that was going to be the way that because the Japanese prisoner is the one who ends up executing Dasan,
Right.
and that was going to be the way that he died. So I think that's just meant to be ironic, and maybe the pistol isn't anything. It's just the fact that it got a close up of its own during that execution scene. To me, felt like but if it really was just the standard firearm, then maybe it wasn't anything.
And the dramatic irony, of course, the guy's name being me.
Yeah,
Obviously. Okay. Well,
I guess Christian had no impression.
Christian is gun go burr. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Mitchell's the weapons expert here. Come on, guys. I don't really have anything else to say other than I would have liked to see me.
Really?
I think it pays off not seeing him personally, but I can see where you're coming from.
I agree. I think it adds to the futility and the kind of lack of motivation that we don't see him, and then we never learn who he was or what he had planned or what happened to him. It's just this faceless entity that hands these people a burden that now is their problem that they've got to deal with. I think that ties in nicely to the premise.
Just like the war.
I think it is helpful that there's at least a couple clues to point to it being a Chinese person, like Mitchell mentioned. So I think that might be the kind of the perfect medium between outright telling us and telling us nothing.
Yeah. Especially because most of the uniforms and everything is extremely accurate. Like, surprisingly, pretty accurate. I think I'm not a huge expert on Chinese military stuff, but with the Japanese stuff, it was pretty good. And the Americans rolling in on we have to mention that rolling in on the freaking Jeep and just driving like shut up, and they drive over the records.
I think that's
like, they think this is really good. He's like, no, shut up.
Yeah, the only lines that an American has in the whole film is basically an R. Lee Ermey impression. Yeah. What are you saying? I can't understand you. With an American flag on their Jeep as flapping in the breeze,
and a UK flag too. There's a freaking British flag.
they've got them all hung up. They have
the Allied,
very unusual looking picture of, I think it's meant to be FDR. And
and the
Churchill one is even weirder.
The Hirohito speech was an interesting inclusion too. I forgot to mention that. That's kind of like
an actual recording of the speech. I'm guessing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
we're getting into territory that's not really covered by the film at this point, but we talked about Oppenheimer a couple of years ago. So I did want to mention, I think it's super interesting that speech, from like as close to the actual event as possible, kind of directly mentions, at least as it's translated in the movie, if this conflict does not stop now, it could destroy the human race, basically. I think that's really interesting that, you know, we're talking about that now, and we're talking about that in the 80s. It's like, what did we do? We didn't know we were opening Pandora's box, and no, like we knew, like days afterward, people knew.
We discovered after Oppenheimer it's a huge Westernism to not say, why didn't you include the bombs actually dropping? Where are all the dead Japanese at? Type impression of the movie. Where it's like, did you see the name of the film? Do you understand what it's about?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's always off the rails on Mitchell episodes, but today we're going to get back on the rails.
Yeah, I think this has been enthusiastically on the rails. I think this has been a good conversation.
Yeah, it's been good. It's a good kind of off the rails, I think.
Christian talked twice.
Zach?
It's a very unusual episode.
Zach thinks off the rails is an inherently bad thing, but I think off the rails is an inherently good thing.
Have you seen Polar Express, Zach? Have you seen? It's like the best part of the movie when they're on the ice. Off the rails. Yes. Okay. Anyway, we can review, guys. We can review.
Are we going to have our SmackDown first, or does Zach want to weigh in on whatever the heck?
Oh, A1. Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Zach, go first.
I would whistle if I could.
Zach, go first. I take the role of Ultraman, but Zach, go first.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Yes, I'll get mine out of the way. But I'm also talking about a superhero thing, because this Monday, Gloria and I sat down and we watched Spider-Man 2.
Yes!
Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. We watched the first Spider-Man movie a couple of weeks ago, and I was surprised at how much Gloria actually really enjoyed it. Because typically action, excitement, people punching each other isn't really Gloria's thing. But she appreciated that so much emphasis in the movie was on Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, who she thought, she thought was adorable. She liked that so much emphasis was on him struggling in school and getting an apartment, and his relationship with his best friend and with his maybe girlfriend, who knows. And she also really didn't mind the superhero stuff that much. I think that the emphasis on the characters meant that the superhero stuff she was invested in, where maybe she wouldn't have been in a different film. By the way, for people who haven't tuned in before, Gloria is my girlfriend. She was on an episode last season, Lennon Naked. Tune in and check it out if you'd like to. And she also really liked Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, which I didn't expect at all. So I thought, okay, this was a hit. We got to watch the second one, because my recollection, I don't think I've seen the second one, or had seen the second one, in maybe over 10 years. It had been a very long time, but I remembered it being better. And I remembered it being, everybody talks about it being better. Not to say the first one is bad, but that's the reputation it has. Spider-Man is good. Spider-Man 2 is even better. And so we put it on and checked it out. And I think, it is. I think it's a much more cohesive, streamlined movie, which I said on Letterboxd. By which I mean, the first Spider-Man movie is kind of scrappy and a little all over the place, and does kind of feel like a collage at times. It has these really goofy transitional edits in some places that feel a little bit like Ang Lee's Hulk. Everybody gives Ang Lee's Hulk like so much flack. But yeah, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man has a scene where like a PNG of a car sort of like fades in. There's a scene where a bunker explodes and then a bunch of graduation caps fly into the foreground, because the next scene is Peter and Harry's graduation. There's some silly stuff in that movie. And it also has a very weird structure too. I remembered this being a lot more kind of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, where the Green Goblin and Peter's development kind of parallel each other. But that's not really the case. Kind of the whole first half of the movie is about Peter becoming Spider-Man, and then the second half of the movie is like, oh, and now the Green Goblin is here. It is kind of weirdly structured. Spider-Man 2, it's a lot truer that the structure of, the path of the villain and the path of the hero parallel each other. It's also shot by Bill Pope, so a different cinematographer who I think I prefer. It has a much more consistent color palette. I think people remember the posters for these movies as being very kind of like yellow sunset tinged. That's not really a thing in the actual movie in the first one, though. It is in this one. It's very funny because we have Mr. Ditkovich and we have J. Jonah Jameson, who has way more scenes in the second movie, where he really only has one in the first one. And this also introduces the J. Jonah Jameson, not one-liners, but kind of the "I hate my wife" comedy, which is present throughout the second one. And he has maybe the defining line at the end of the movie where Mary Jane leaves the wedding and he tells his wife to call the caterer and make sure she doesn't open the caviar. It's really good. It's a great movie. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Now, Gloria didn't like it as much, and I think because she appreciated the scrappiness of the first one. And I think there's a lot more posturing about what it means to be a superhero in the second movie. So Peter Parker isn't as much just kind of a regular teen as he was in the first one. So I see why it didn't appeal to her as much. And she mentioned especially that she thought the Green Goblin and Willem Dafoe was more compelling than Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, which I can see. No shade at all to Alfred Molina. I think he's an interesting character, but Willem Dafoe is hard to beat as that character. And there was also when Green Goblin died in the first film, and as the glider is charging at him, when he goes, "Oh," she thought that was hilarious. in a way, she wasn't into the action of the second film in the same way. But yeah, I mean, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but Spider-Man 2, pretty good movie. You should check it out if you haven't seen it already. We probably won't be watching the third.
No, you have to now.
Just because it was my mentality knowing that superhero movies knowing that superhero movies aren't really Gloria's thing. I thought, okay, I'm not going to make her watch the third one unless she wants to watch it based on the first two. And she decided she wasn't interested. Now, yes, if I let her know about the memes, which Christian is currently acting out in his basement, then, perhaps she'd be interested. But for now, we're probably not going to check it out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the fight of the century over James Gunn's Superman. Let's get ready to rumble.
Which we both liked, I think.
Well, I thought it was pretty good, Zach. I thought it was pretty good. I think my problem is that old boy running DC Studios right now. That old, not so old, young hipster named Jamesathy Gunn, senior or junior. Okay, look. I have to mention that I've had inklings of understanding Superman things before. I was a little wee boy when I saw Smallville clips, and I've seen recent Smallville clips. Okay, I'm not completely uneducated, right? I had an instructor for a class recently. His name was Christopher Reeve with an S. Reeves.
Oh, okay.
So clearly it was meant to be, right? And that's my boy. That's my OG. But look, okay. I like the action. I like the way the action is done. I do appreciate it. It's really great to watch. It's very mesmerizing. I just think the way the comedy is played off and the way a lot of those scenes feel tonally is very reminiscent of Guardians. And it's one thing to have a directorial style and to have that style be consistent. And some of those things, by the way, just in case, everybody in the Twitch chat, just in case you're listening, right? In the message in our chat, right? We talked about I talked about. I wrote a paragraph about a bunch of things that were in Guardians that were also in this. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I actually really liked that out of focus shot when they were talking was actually really cool. And I was totally behind it. I was also behind the monster being in the movie. I just think with everything else, with the kind of the teaming up and the beaming and the different I'm not a huge fan of like Hawkgirl. I mean, Mr. Terrific is great. I gotta say, I think he's awesome.
Come on.
Right?
Hell yeah.
Nathan Fillion's okay. I've heard mixed things about Guy Gardner and all that, but I'm
he's like that.
I know, and I know that's kind of partially purposeful. I just that awkward band of goobers, and they just can't help themselves but to make jokes when they're all talking to each other, and just be like have a slightly tinge of darkness to their humor is so much like Guardians to me, and that really bothered me throughout the whole film. And does that mean that it necessarily like doesn't work in this universe or that it's not applicable to those characters? It is to some extent, but it's very much feels like a copy and paste when you have all these other things riding on it that are so similar. And I just think it goes beyond directorial style at that point. At that point, it's just it's becoming a little bit derivative. Now, obviously, getting into Superman himself, I do think he's done very great. And I reacted a little bit weird when he started talking on a pedestal with Lex Luthor, who Nicholas Hoult obviously is the GOAT. Everybody can agree on that he was freaking goated as Lex Luthor. But I started to cringe a little bit, and then I realized like, oh crap, this is actually a very comic booky moment right now when Superman stands on his morals and just starts talking down to Lex. And I thought that was like, once the scene was over, I was like, my first reaction was like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. But I was like, wow, this is actually very much a comic booky moment. And I just thought that was really cool. And there was other moments in the film I felt that way. But another James Gunnism, interdimensional stuff. Like, does it make sense in the universe? Yes. Is it justified in the universe? I guess so. But it's just like another like subplot point that's reiterated. And there's a whole prison scene that's reiterated. And there's that one guy that gets shot, and that's Lex's like one big moment, right? Which it works in the moment. It's kind of cool. But then there's like this little alien baby, and that's also done in Guardians too. And it's just like for some reason I couldn't get out of my head the whole time. But with all these different scenes being so reminiscent of it, I think that was what was bothering me. It's kind of a very specific critique. It's like not necessarily criticizing the film on like some gargantuan like representation of Superman or anything, which is kind of like the general DC movieism right now, is the kind of like your first reaction is to like, how do they handle the character from the comics? Are they doing the character justice? Ironically, doing the character justice in film form, especially considering previous iterations. And in this, I 100% think so. I 100% think so. I'm a huge fan of the Superman. I'm a huge fan of pretty much every aspect. I'm very happy about how the cameos are very restricted. Although the second, spoiler, you see freaking Supergirl, I'm like, oh, there we go. There's the reason why they're showing Supergirl. I know why they're doing that. And then I'm already seeing the advertising on my freaking phone now for that. And now she's calling me. You can see I'm getting a call now because from James Gunn, he's frustrated with me calling out Supergirl. But yeah, also have to mention Krypto. I'm sorry. Close-ups of the CGI dog bother me, okay? It really bothers me. I'm sorry. I understand Krypto is cute, yes. But I do not like close-ups. The CGI, for some reason, is not good enough to me. And the fact that it's a real animal in real life that's being portrayed in CGI is what bothers me. Because if you have aliens, or like, for example, even with the biomechanicalness in Guardians, which I'm not sure the visuals, if the CGI is better in Guardians, I would probably say it is. And I hate to be that comparative guy again, but I'm just saying that I just don't think the Krypto close-ups work very good for me. But writing-wise, the insertion of Krypto in key moments in fights and everything, I think that's great. I don't really have any criticism of that, but yeah, it was a great film to watch. I was not disappointed, just in the things that I mentioned.
I would posit that perhaps as a mediator here, as the moderator of this debate, I would posit that maybe the fact that Rocket is like not meant to look like an actual raccoon and is like a character makes him less unusual to watch in CGI than something that's meant to look like an actual dog.
Yes.
Mr. Maric, your response to the question.
This is also a technicality, but Crypto is an alien. He's not an Earth dog.
I know.
He's from Krypton.
There is that. Yeah, he's from Krypton.
They've just got dogs? Never mind. I'm not a member of this debate.
Yeah, this is...
I think they allude to it in the movie, too, if I remember correctly.
They do. It's very easy to say X comic book movie is just like a comic book, and that often doesn't mean much. I think when you say that about a movie like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, you're talking about the style of the fights, the literal like pow showing up on the screen, and you're hearing it, and it's literally like jumping out like a panel. I think this feels a lot like a comic book in the sense that it's not an origin story. You more or less are entrusted to know who all of the characters are or what their purpose or place is in the story, and it really, really goes. It feels like Superman #1 in like 2025, where they're just starting a new run so a bunch of people can subscribe to the title again. But it's not belaboring anything. And I think you could criticize it for being overstuffed, if only because you want to spend more time on things. I thought a lot about Zach's comments about The Life of Chuck when I was thinking about how to explain how much I enjoyed this. And it gave me so much to enjoy in so many different relationships, but I still wanted more. I think the castings are just total slam dunks. I think David Cornsweet is phenomenal as Superman. He has the Boy Scout charm. He has the illogical optimism and belief in goodness in everyone. And Rachel Brosnahan's Lois Lane is very interesting, and they kind of lean into this sort of yin-yang approach with the two of them that I didn't expect, but made their romance a lot more interesting than if they were just lovey-dovey the whole time. Nicholas Hoult is probably the best Luthor we've had yet. I still don't know if he really fits my understanding of Luthor as this like torture genius. I think he was pushing the edgelord a little bit with the Ultraman A1 virtual fighting. But I think it's hard to juggle so many characters. I think, like many, I was nervous about the inclusion of multiple Justice Leaguers in this being a Superman movie. But I think that functions as including the requisite amount of other superheroes to answer the question, well, if the world's about to end, where the heck are all the other superheroes? I don't think any of them take away from it being Superman's story at any point. As far as the Guardian stuff, it totally feels like a James Gunn film, but it doesn't feel like it's mimicking Guardians to me. Having rewatched all three Guardians like a year and a half ago, I think when I think of the Guardians humor, I think of the really like hyper doofusy Drax Mantis laugh lines, and I was worried that you might get characters forced into that mold. I think you get like maybe a version of that with Guy Gardner's snarkiness, but I don't think any of the characters are written to mimic exactly the Guardians characters. I think everything James Gunn does is in service to the characters in the story, and I think the action's great. I loved Crypto. I think the CGI for Crypto is really good. Maybe not like Rocket and Guardians 3 good, especially because Rocket's like a main character and like all the budget went to Rocket on that movie. But I think it's great. I have basically no complaints about it. I think like coming off of Thunderbolts, which I enjoyed, but was unremarkable to me, this was just like so 10 billion times more engaging on a story level, on a visual level. I haven't felt this way about a Marvel movie since the last time James Gunn directed a Marvel movie. So I couldn't recommend it enough. I hope people aren't subscribing to the whole like DC Marvel rivalry. You can only choose one. And I kind of hope DC beats Marvel in the popularity contest in the short term, because to me, like every filmmaking element of this is just leagues higher than anything Marvel's put out. It's sincere.
How many of these?
A Justice League. Yeah, there you go. 4.5. I loved it. I may
I
yet
do
see it
want to
again in the
mention
theater.
a slight minor issue. Now, I will not fault, especially a film like this, for assuming knowledge beforehand. I will not do that, especially because there is so many established Superman properties, and Superman is kind of ingrained in American culture for so long that it's a very safe assumption to assume that people generally know who the characters are. And even if, like, come on, like, everyone remembers how terrible the Green Lantern, the fallout was so bad. So you could at least, he's Lantern Corps. He's Lantern Corps. You know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Hawkgirl's like self-explanatory, and Mr. Terrific actually has some pretty good he has pretty good quips, but he also has some pretty good development throughout the film. And it's almost like he's kind of proving himself to you the whole time. And I think that's kind of something that I thought was pretty unique and pretty interesting. I almost feel like Zach kind of coming like, I'm just going to choose the one character like that nobody's paying attention to. Well, everyone's paying attention to Mr. Terrific, to be honest. But like everyone's like, Superman Corn Sweat is great and everything, obviously. I will say, I do not think there is a romance in this film. I don't think the actual, like, the quote unquote relationship or dating thing that's going on, I feel like that's largely left to assumption. And there is a grandiose scene everybody knows about when they're floating and everything. A lot of it is very metaphorical and mostly surface level, besides one conversation. And they have little backs and forth, but we only really see Clark Kent, like, for real, like, once. And that's like the one time they also showed it in the trailer. Now, everybody calm down. The Batman fans coming out, they didn't get Bruce Wayne in this movie. The justification for that was that it was early on, that he's still struggling with being Batman, and that the film was largely about that struggle with him being Batman. It wasn't about Bruce Wayne or his position or anything. And a similar argument could be made here. It's not really about Clark Kent. It's not about him. We're not in an origin story where we're establishing where he is. But I will say that it's fairly integral to his character. And I also think his relationship to Lois Lane is fairly integral to his character. And I think it's a bold risk, but I would consider that like a minor issue. Especially because you're coming into it with kind of an expectation that you'd see a little bit more of that interpersonal conflict. And I think it would help a little bit more with investing in Superman as a character, rather than kind of relying on those big Superman moments where he's like, stating business, his monologues, and then he's also absolutely pounding these fakers that Lex is throwing at him.
I have not seen the film, but I would wonder, based on your descriptions, if if this is just meant to be kind of like a couple days in the life of Superman. Because I have heard that originally there were going to be title cards throughout the film, like Monday, Tuesday, like it was meant to be like a week in his life or something like that. But if it's meant to just be like, this is just like a comic, I'm not a big comic reader, but does every Superman comic feature, Lois and Clark going to dinner or painting the kitchen? I feel like maybe, for sometimes Lois just isn't really like a big part of the stuff that happens. And you still kind of know that they're in a relationship. Now, I could get stomped into the ground by the film itself because I know nothing, for I have not seen it. But that's just what occurs to me when I hear what you guys have mentioned.
Yeah, I think a lot of her scenes are almost independent from Clark. I think a lot of what Mitchell's saying is fair. Like her role in the Daily Planet is kind of more in the focus most of the time she's on screen than is her relationship with Superman. There's like a little almost mini Star Wars crawl type thing at the beginning to give you some context. Like Superman landed on Earth 3 years ago, or became Superman 3 years ago, or something like that. Okay. Just like generic catch-up stuff.
I thought that was great. I thought that was really freaking cool, honestly. That intro.
Yeah, it's effective. It doesn't ask too much of your audience. I think the last thing I'll say is if there was more studio interference here, I think you would have probably seen, like, as opposed to Metamorpho and Mr. Terrific, you might have seen like Batman and Wonder Woman pigeonholed into this. But instead, I think James Gunn continues to make choices that make the world feel larger and more beholden to possibilities. And I think that's great.
And there is another minor Easter egg spoiler, Zach, in case you happen to care or not. It's not really a big deal. There is a street sign, and it says Smallville, and there's another one that says Gotham City. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay.
If you're dropping it in there,
I missed that.
If it's on the highway signs, if
okay.
if you're dropping the look, Christian, there's no way this is not going to blow up. This is going to be a universe. Everyone has to accept that.
Yeah.
And the more lore I hear behind the Batman, when I keep hearing it's gonna get killed, and then it keeps coming back to the second sequel.
I know, dude.
I'm freaking worried about the second one.
I am too.
The second one's not looking too bright, and I'm just saying with this film, it operates great standalone, but this universe, it's almost like it's begging to get gigantic. And I'm just saying, I don't know how James Gunn's gonna handle that if he's at the helm.
I am going to chime in and say in his original video, which seemed to come completely out of the blue, where he announced, "Hey guys, I'm in charge of DC now." James Gunn did mention that the Matt Reeves Batman movies were going to be like Elseworlds, and that Batman was not going to intersect with the main universe. And he, at that point, was talking about a Batman movie that would be in universe that would be made by Andy Muschietti, which would be Batman the Brave and the Bold, which...
with Damian Wayne, his son,
as
Robin.
I don't like Andy. Actually, sorry, Andy. I don't like Andy Muschietti. So who knows? And I'm certainly not that deep in the lore or how this universe will be built out. But it is nice, even as somebody who's not big into superheroes and hasn't seen the movie, it's nice to see this universe being run by somebody who actually seems to enjoy comics.
Yes.
I think I have been rewatching Zack Snyder's movies very slowly because he's a director whose movies I've seen before, but I didn't write reviews of them at the time. And as I've said for quite a few directors who I don't really like, well, if I'm going to hate the man, I ought to know something about him. So I decided I'm going to watch all of his movies. And I was reading an interview with him the other day from like when he was signed on as head of the DC universe. And he said something like, well, when I was a kid, I didn't really like comics, although I read a lot of heavy metal magazine because there was lots of like sex and death. And then when I read regular comics, I was like, why should I be entertained by this? Nobody's having sex or killing each other. And that's pretty much a direct quote, which I think emphasizes why he was a terrible choice to run a comic book universe for the cinema.
And that's why Man of Steel is the way that it is.
And Batman versus Superman. Yeah. And probably his Justice League too. I still haven't seen the fabled Snyder cut, but I will get to it eventually.
Oh, dude.
I think
should be like a Cookie Pocket event. Don't tempt me.
If James Gunn keeps releasing DC movies that Christian likes, Christian's not going to be able to make it through the Snyder cut ever again.
Yeah, man. I'm going to have to redact that 3.5-star rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch it at some point. I just need like a totally open Sunday where I can like put lunch in the middle, shadow box for a while and then go back in.
I'd rather watch the Omens, all 3 first ones in a row. Or 4.
Well, by Jove, didn't we do that and discuss that on Week in the Review in whatever episode?
Oh, Zachary, you may be correct in that assumption.
Annotation. Well, YouTube doesn't do annotations anymore. Check out the link below.
I don't know if we did Week in Review on those. I know we watched them, but
I thought we did a combined Week in Review. Anyhow, now we are really getting off the rails. Is it time that I draw my prompt for next episode?
No, Zach.
No, it's not.
Time that you perish.
Oh no!
You're gonna turn into that old man that said "turtle screwer" in the movie.
Yeah, is there what was the deal with that?
Well, something I didn't mention, very sidebar, but Chinese are very into puns and are super into like linguistic comedy and things that are absolutely don't make sense from a verbal perspective. Americans are a lot more direct and like we use puns sparingly, and if we do, they usually are completely like far out of this world. So I guess in this sense, it sort of doesn't make any sense, but also it's like still used as an insult and kind of feeds into his character a little bit more than Paul Blart playing Guitar Hero in a mall or something.
Well, I don't know if the nature of a pun is even the same in other languages as it is in English.
Oh,
but
yeah.
maybe that term in Mandarin sounds like something else in Mandarin, which makes it into a joke. Maybe
sure.
it's just translated as that because there's no direct translation, and it's actually just some other like deeply offensive word or something.
It's very extremely difficult to make puns in English compared to Chinese, where there's a lot of flexibility with the pinyin characters. But anyway, sidebar complete. Zach, it's time to cook.
Oh,
it's time
boy.
to get one hit.
A dead man walking.
A jury of your peers having found you guilty, we have sentenced you to one punishment rundown, encompassing all of the films we've discovered thus
throwback.
far.
Okay, all right. This wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought you were going to force me to use my phone a friend or something.
Sorry, Jeopardy's.
No.
That's a season
You don't
1
have to eat a
throwback.
shoe yet, Zach.
I credit all these to Christian. He did a bang up job, so we're gonna full send it now.
Hardly.
What I'm hearing is that the architect of my destruction was Christian, and that Mitchell didn't have anything to do with this.
We're calling
except for the offensive ones; those were all Mitchell.
Christian. In reality, Christian is the president. I'm the Speaker of the House, so this is one big beautiful punishment rundown.
I'm gonna vote to have that name changed to the travesty rundown.
1. Zach Garrigus as Jake Hannaford.
3 out of 5.
Mountain Town Population Cult Assassins.
2 out of 5.
Pitchy saxophone score.
4 out of 5.
Rosalba Neri's talents.
3 out of 5.
Taking 40 years to finish and release a movie.
3 out of 5.
Keanu Reeves bait.
2 out of 5.
John Reynolds as Torgo.
4 out of 5.
Sake!
2 out of 5.
I may be a woman, but I'm also a doctor.
5 out of 5.
Stahelski reshoots.
2 out of 5.
A Netflix original Orson Welles film.
Oh, 2 out of 5.
Getting with the Widow of the Man You Killed.
3 out of 5.
Getting with Your Brother's Widow.
2 out of 5.
Calling Things What They Are.
4 out of 5.
Making a horror movie to win a bet.
4 out of 5.
Zach Garrigus as Gabriel Byrne and Ian McShane at the same time.
4 out of 5.
Happy New Year, brother and sister-in-law. You are my granddad. I am your son.
4 out of 5. I'm going to be totally honest.
Oof.
We have done enough episodes in enough time at this point that I'm not entirely sure what all of those were from.
That's good.
Therein
That's
lies
good.
the punishment. Your eternal confusion.
All right. Well,
Yes.
now it is time for me to generate the next prompt.
Generate.
I've got my random number generator up. I have drawn a number. What are the odds? Okay, I have drawn the prompt. We are stuck in a whirlpool here. A film produced in China and released within the last 2 years. So it's even more random. Even more by chance than the time we did an accidental World War II trilogy. This is like 3 layers of accidental China trilogy.
Oh, it wasn't
China
accidental. That was
Japan
intentional. That was intentional. You better get on Little Redbook or TikTok /Douyin right now, Zach. You are one of us. One of us.
I'm going to have to think about this one because I could. This opens up some real bags of worms. Are we counting Taiwan? Are we counting Hong Kong?
No. Yes. No and yes.
It depends on Zachary's allegiance. We're in a free country right now.
I might have to film a video in broken Mandarin explaining how that Taiwan is actually part of China. We'll see.
Yeah, you have to make a John Cena apology video.
Well, if you want to see me apologize to the Chinese Communist Party, tune in next time to Cookie Pocket, the game of the game. Until then, adios.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.